You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in a special guest, Tom Lenfestey, attorney, CPA, founder, and CEO of the Law Practice Exchange. And we'll get to Tom in just a moment. But first, a message from our partner at CallRail. How many high-value cases did you lose in the past year because your firm couldn't respond fast enough? 81% of law firms say that slow response times are costing them business and sometimes nearly a quarter of their annual revenue. That's why you need CallRail in 2026. That's going to be integrated into your case management system. CallRail helps you capture every call, even after hours, spot those high-value leads, instantly respond faster, and gain the insights you need to bring on those bigger cases. Join over 3,000 law firms using CallRail to follow up faster, land bigger cases, and drive real growth. You can start your free trial today. The link's in our bio and down below. Now back to our guest, Mr. Tom. How are you?
I'm doing well, Betty. How about you? Having a good day so far?
Good. We're doing good. So Tom is an attorney, CPA, founder, and CEO of the Law Practice Exchange based in North Carolina. Tom spent more than a decade helping law firms across the country buy, sell, merge, value, and succession plan their firms on their own terms. Since launching the Law Practice Exchange in 2013, Tom and his team have supported transactions representing hundreds of millions of dollars in law firm revenue while helping thousands of attorneys think differently about the future of their practice. Tom recently released a book, The Exit Blueprint, a practical guide helping law firm owners understand succession, valuation, transferable value, and what it really takes to prepare a law firm for transition in today's rapidly changing legal market. Tom, welcome to Lawyer Stories once again.
Thanks, Benny. Makes me feel old when you go through like the years of...
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm probably older by like a decade anyway, so...
Yeah, I've been out this a while, so yeah, it's a good thing.
It doesn't make you seem old, it makes you seem seasoned in what you're doing.
Oh, that's right. Experienced.
There you go, experienced, yes. Yeah. So let's start with the beginning, Tom. Like, where did you grow up and what originally drew you towards both law and accounting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a hybrid, like a lot of others here in North Carolina, originally from Michigan, the Detroit area. My parents are both Detroiters. Had the opportunity to take an opportunity back in the 80s and move to North Carolina. So I spent my younger years growing up in North Carolina and then back up to Michigan and then back down to North Carolina for my college years. And really, Benny, I think, in college, anything else, I started out as a poli-sci major planning to go to law school.
Yep.
With the look of, though, what if I don't go to law school, right? Like, do I really like poli-sci, anything else? And so really looked at what I liked. I liked finance. I leaned into accounting because accounting, could be a really good base and was really a highly in demand degree if that law school thing didn't work out. And so I ended up doing accounting, ended up doing my master's in accounting, which let me get to my CPA, and then went on to law school.
Wow.
And so, yeah, glutton for punishment in some ways because I have way too much.
Was that like, was law school like, and I hate to say this, but was law school like easier compared to like the CPAs?
Yes.
Yeah,
it was. It's 3 years versus the Master's of Accounting is a 1-year program. Yeah. But I tell everybody, when I got to the point of the bar exam, and I had already gone through the CPA exam, the pass rate first time for CPA exams, at least when I was taking it, was well below 50%.
Really?
First time taker. And, the law school I went to was very high on, passing the bar was going to be a goal. And so I think their pass rate usually was, 85, 90%.
Really?
So you just felt better walking in like, I got this.
Yeah.
Right? For CPA exam, it was a little bit tougher.
That's amazing. So you have, it's a rare combination, I think. I think you see it sometimes, but like, how have both being an attorney and a CPA, like, both perspectives shape the way you look at businesses and law firms?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know that I appreciated it really starting out in practice to have the CPA background with law. And then as, I practice in private practice, trust and estate. So estate planning, estate administration, business corporate with a little bit of tax planning. And as you get in and you just work with entrepreneurs, you just start to see the business model. I mean, you kind of feel it a little bit more, the financial. You also start to be able to help where they have a little pain, which is a lot of times the cash flow of the business, what's going on. So it was beyond the legal. And that's really some of that entrepreneurship flow in me, was seeing all these businesses in private practice. And then that's, what moved into really helping, lawyers and law firms, professional practices, do the same. Is I just saw that there was an ability really to focus on building, financially healthy businesses and hopefully transferring those to the next generation.
So are you able to, where some lawyers might see a tax issue while doing estate planning, like are you able to solve some of those sometimes? That some attorneys might farm it out to like, if it gets to sell like a couple $1,000,000 or something, like something that has greater tax implications.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not in practice anymore, but even doing what we're doing in M&A advisory with the Law Practice Exchange, we try to, I tell everybody, I'm not your attorney. I'm not your CPA,
right? But
I am an attorney CPA. And so the overall goal is to really issue a spot, make sure we're doing that, and hopefully catching those well ahead of time, right? Where others may miss, and, efficiently tee things up so that when we tag in attorneys or CPAs to a deal, things are a little more organized, or we already have some strategies there. I recently just attended, Mass Towards Puerto Rico conference, nice. And I sat in the session on like the Puerto Rico tax incentives, right? If you move there, where a lot of our plaintiff attorneys are relocating to Puerto Rico. And as the CPA minded me, they're like, man, this is just great, right? It's good tax strategies to potentially bring the clients to add value, right?
Yeah. And so like before launching the Law Practice Exchange, like what were you seeing in the legal industry that others might have been overlooking?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in private practice helping at that time a lot of dentists, doctors to some extent, CPAs, investment advisors. And where I was finding it is I was the back end of, they'd come to me and say, hey, I hired this, specialist broker or M&A advisor. I've sold my practice. Can you help me plan for it, transact it? And as my own practice was going and growing, I was really looking at like, man, who is doing this for lawyers? Because, I'm putting a lot of effort into growing my own practice. It would be great to know that there's an exit value and an exit path. And at the time when I really looked around, say 2011, 2012, there wasn't really. I mean, there was definitely some out there, but there wasn't the marketplace that was really needed to say, hey, we can find you somebody who sees value in what you've built and, will monetize your practice so you can retire, you can exit for any reason. And so at that point, the entrepreneurship bug definitely bit me.
Yeah.
I read a book called Built to Sell by John Warlow, and, it just kind of made sense. And I said, somebody really needs to do this for lawyers. And so that was the start to the Law Practice Exchange.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's such an amazing thing to think about, like how it's true. Like succession planning for your firm is so important. And did you have like a specific moment, or you talked about like realizing that a lot of firms didn't have that? Or did you have a specific moment where you knew like that was something that you could do and be successful at?
Yeah, I think learning, I tell everybody I try to be a student of other industry. I don't always know that I'm, the most novel, but it's looking. And when I was working with dentists, others, it just made sense. And lawyers do build value, and it's become very apparent, especially over the last couple of years as the market's grown. Lawyers are building value, and they deserve the opportunity and the right to monetize that value. So I think it was really sitting in my own practice, investing all that time saying, great, this is really nice to get a check and get income on a monthly basis, and make money. But man, would it be nice to monetize this when you go to exit that practice, right? To truly have an exit value. And so that's what started my charge forward.
So when you exit a practice, what do you mean? Like when somebody else is exiting practice, or like for them to just make money on their their practice, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, to sell it. Really, to be able to truly transfer ownership in one structure or another, but it's really to sell. I mean, I tell everybody, I call it selling a law firm, and everybody's like, well, isn't it succession planning? Isn't it this? Look, it can come in a lot of different structures, but really what it is you've built something and you're going to pass that baton to somebody else, and you're going to step back, right? And from ownership, eventually from potentially practicing law, otherwise, but transfer that business that you've built to somebody else, and hopefully, get a check, or a compensation stream from it,
Right.
from the value and benefit from the business you built.
So say it's like a father-son business. Do you even help with that? Like structure that? Like if somebody already knows who they're going to sell it to or will it to or that sort of thing, and you just kind of help with the structure?
Yeah, absolutely. At the Law Practice Exchange, we've really kind of divided into, we have our marketplace, which is our Zillow for law firms.
Yeah, just quote that.
I think we have about 2,000 buyers and sellers in the marketplace, 125, active listings. So pretty active to allow us to really grow and scale the marketplace and help those buyers and sellers over there. And then the other is our private market advisory, which, Benny, as you're kind of mentioning, like internal succession planning or larger scale firms that aren't in the marketplace and really need more of that strategic, investor buyer, whether that's private equity or otherwise, sit over there. So our goal is to help you, right, really see that succession plan through whatever path it needs to take.
That's crazy because, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I feel like this is, and I'm sorry if somebody is listening to this and I'm wrong, but this is like the first time I've heard about like the marketplace for selling the actual firm. I mean, we talk all the time about referring specific cases, but like this is the firm, and even, whether or not you have somebody to will it to or give it to or whatnot, you're going to set them up so that the seller can benefit from it too. So like lawyer story wise, you said you didn't originally set out to build the marketplace, but you did set up to solve a problem. And was that what you touched on earlier, that the succession planning, there's not much of that going on? Or tell us about the problem.
Yeah, I think the problem was what we were seeing is calls I still get all the time, right? That we still get is it's the 65-year-old lawyer who's built a practice. They started to slow down. They tried to hire associates in the past. It didn't work out. Now they're at a loss of what to do. And historically, Benny, most of them would just wind down the practice, right? Kind of let it. And it's, in a legacy play, to me, that's so hard. Lawyers really, we like our legacies, right? We like our personal brands and else. And so from that standpoint, it was, wait a minute, like, why can this dentist walk into my law practice, hire a broker, find this young associate dentist who's going to give them, essentially $1 million at closing for their practice from a bank funded deal, and law firms that are built really well and have good value can't do the same. And so that's really the problem I saw, was just lawyers didn't have the path. And we had to create the process, really, because it's different than dental, it's different than accounting. And, over the last decade plus of doing so, we've had the success stories to show, how it works, and it can work for you. And now we're all about, promoting the knowledge and saying, hey, look, you may not have considered it. It's like Benny didn't know there was a marketplace. You may, lawyer, not known that this was an option, but it is.
There's a marketplace for everything. Come on. They don't even have a Boston accent, but that's how they'd say it here. So do you actively reach out to people in their 70s who are still practicing and be like, hey, send them a flyer on the windshield and be like, let us help you figure out maybe it's not like that, but is that something you do, push it along like that a little bit?
Yeah, we're always pushing marketing, right? Sometimes our biggest challenge is just PR. People, lawyers knowing that we're here and we're here to help, and it's an option and it can be successful. They have to believe it's an option for them. But to your point is, whether it's the 60s or 70s and we're doing a talk, I've given plenty of CLEs where, they come back and, pop up later. The sad part, Benny, is we also get calls from the 85-year-olds, believe it or not, that, call and say, I'm just getting information. I'm not ready to do it yet, right? And it's just because lawyers, when we get that, it's so much our identity of practicing law or owning this practice or anything else for maybe 30, 40, 50 years plus. they can't really emotionally can't make that first step.
Yeah.
And so that's the sad part. That's the part we're hoping to change over time.
So speaking of identity, like, does some of these firms want to keep their name, like their good name? Like, say, like you have, I'm from Portland, Maine. Say you have a good attorney, and they've built up obviously the reputation over the years. I mean, can that be part of the sale? Is that like something that you kind of like negotiate with?
Absolutely. Even on some of these larger deals now, like larger to smaller, if you've built a brand and that brand's built around you, right? That's something that the, buyer, the next generation is going to want, because that's, whether it's community brand, and that just means, everybody in the community, or they know your law firm sits on, First Street, right there. Yes, absolutely. That's what they want, because that's what brings in clients. That's part of what you built as a business. And even on these large, personal injury firm transactions that we're seeing now in the market, Benny, those are name, image, likeness, because a lot of these API attorneys, of course, are on the billboards, on the TV commercials, have built everything. And so when they do go to transact and, find an investor or buyer for their firm, they do have to transfer, where they built it. It's part of their brand, right? They're the celebrity behind that. And so that is a lot of what, buyers are looking for. If it produces. And usually it's not a big issue, because most sellers feel the fit and they feel that legacy play. And so.
Whoa. Okay. And so, Tom, how long, I guess it depends on the firm, but how long does the transition like generally take between like the buyer and the seller? And like, do you involve yourself in that? Or sometimes in real estate, like the seller wanting to know who the buyer is. I'm guessing that's not kind of like how this goes down, right? They want to know who they're giving their goodwill to. But are you in the process all the way, like whatever it takes, like a year or two to like get the thing moving?
Yeah, the overall goal is we start, a seller, in the go-to-market process, right? Get a valuation, know what your market terms are, get prepped. And usually if the seller's ready to go, that can be as short as a few weeks, or a month or two, to go through financials and everything else. Once they find that potential buyer, that right fit, we are there. Our marketplace offers what we call an advisory. So we really walk sellers and buyers through the process, help them go through, negotiate the offers, go through due diligence, which is legal agreements, financial, make the transition plan, which is what you brought up, which is really the key. Like I said, most of these transactions are a baton pass. They're not a throw of the keys. And so after the transaction, some sellers don't want to stop. They want to keep marketing. They want to keep practicing law. And most buyers are like, wonderful, right? Stick with us and, do that. But for those that want to exit because they're retiring or they're moving on to something else, on average, our transition period is probably 6 to 18 months.
Okay.
It really just depends on the nature of the practice. If the practice has been built more around systems and a brand versus just personally, like I run the practice, everybody knows me, everything goes. The more it's built around systems and brand, the quicker you can transition it.
So when you launched in 2013, did people immediately understand the vision, or did you have to educate like a lot of people, like what you were doing?
Still doing it, Benny. I mean, this is why we're here. Yeah. In 2013, in 2013 when we launched, it was funny. I went to our Lawyers Mutual, right, our E&O carrier in the state, and I went to our bar association. And I figured if they run me out of the building, maybe this isn't a good idea, right? Like anything else. The contrary was they welcomed it with open arms. And we actually started doing some programs, and we went kind of on the road. And what I heard from attorneys was, look, you can't do this. One, it's unethical. You can't sell a law firm. Well, we had to educate them about Rule 1.17 with ABA, like sale of a law firm. Well, two, my practice has no value without me. And we'd have to go through, that's funny. Does the phone still ring when you take vacation? When you come back, is there more work to do than when you left and everything else? How you can transfer that value is the question. And so, yeah, I think we've been on that since 2013 is really as you build a marketplace, which largely we have been. We've been building this marketplace overall, so lawyers have an option. But with it comes a lot of education. And look, we're still learning, and we're trying to pass on that education to those that are getting ready to maybe, plan for exit or are 10 years, 15 years away from it, just so their firms can have, the best options, the most success, and this marketplace really moves as it should.
And conversely, like if you get a young lawyer who's like, hey, I'm looking for a law firm to maybe purchase, like I want to like jump right in, like does that benefit you guys at all too?
Absolutely. We'll welcome them over to join our marketplace. We can put search criteria in, get, weekly alerts based on firms that may meet their criteria.
Wow.
Again, so it's really meant to be, matchmaking and then help them go from matchmaking to a successful deal. And the interesting part, Benny, is, we used to, when we started this, have a lot more young individual attorneys. Now it's more boutique law firms that are a buyer. And now we have private capital, private equity moving into the space.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that only legal in like Arizona though? Like with the...
Yep. So there's the vehicle. We have Arizona, Puerto Rico, DC to some extent are non-attorney ownership jurisdictions. Or what they call ABS, alternative business structures. So if you go through Arizona, Puerto Rico, and go through the filing, you can have a non-attorney owner. However, what's really taken off in the last year or so is managed service organizations, where essentially just a short summary is the law firm stays the law firm, but everything else goes to the managed service entity. And that's where like a private capital, a non-attorney investor would invest and own. And then there's a relationship between that managed service and the law firm. So there is a flow of funds. It has to be done ethically, everything else. But those are the vehicles we're seeing that's really moving the market now as private capital and others come into the space.
Wow, man, you know a lot about this stuff. All right, so what are the biggest challenges in building a national marketplace specifically for the lawyers?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is awareness and education, right? We've got to make sure that we're known, across, because that's the belief in having a national marketplace. We get a lot of sellers that say, well, I'm in, Idaho. How many transactions, how many buyers do you have in Idaho? Most of our buyers that buy practices, if they were going to buy a practice in Idaho, they're going to be out of state. They're just looking at expansion into Idaho, right? So the overall goal is to have national because of that network and because buyers look for geographic expansion. Sellers can come from everywhere, and we hopefully can play matchmaking. But I think the overarching is really to get the word out there, to get connected as much as we can based on that growth. The other is, there is differences, jurisdictional differences, how different, bars run things, bar associations, state bars. But overall, I think it's really, like we'll kind of compare. Florida is a very, very competitive, state. And so, you've had lots of guests from, the plaintiff side of the bar that are in Florida. Anything else? It's a different world. When we go through with a potential seller in Florida, they don't want to talk to any Florida buyers, right? Like, because it's so competitive, right? They don't want to talk to anybody outside. So you just kind of understand there is geographic differences in the marketplace overall. But the overall goal on the national part is really to just spread this as it's an option, right? The overall marketplace is there for lawyers. Give yourself the time, prep as you can, and the success can be yours.
Are there any firms that wouldn't qualify to join the marketplace?
Yeah, we have firms on there that are as low as a couple $100,000 in revenues, really a solo practitioner that's, got a good book, just looking to transition it. And we have buyers over there that are looking to pick those up. We just had one go under contract. It was a really neat practice. They focused on healthcare, employment agreements for just healthcare providers. So big, but a really nice niche that a buyer that already owns a firm can kind of roll into and take that stream of revenue. I think when it doesn't fit is really based on you haven't given yourself enough time, or we have, just unreasonable expectations. Because the value aspect, if you have a small practice, to extract that value, it's, the margins get slimmer, right? For a buyer or anything else to do that.
Right.
And so sometimes if you're a law firm owner at a small firm right now, and you're not even paying yourself, a true salary, that's tough, to transact, because you really got to give and just get whatever value you want. But otherwise, I really think there's an avenue, there's a structure for most practices out there. It just comes down to really looking at, what are your goals as a seller? Can you be reasonable enough? Do you give yourself enough time to find the right buyer to do that? And are you open to those various structures?
So let's go back. You said something about Florida. Like I might have missed that. Like that people don't, like the plaintiffs don't want to let anybody else know that they're buying a firm. Is that what you were saying?
Well, the reverse. So the sellers, right? If they're a law firm owner looking to exit or sell or anything else, it's just, it's the competitive. So we deal in a confidential world, right?
Yeah.
Anybody we talk to is signed a non-disclosure agreement. We go through and vet those buyers and sellers, everything else from that side. So it's just a little bit different, right? California's in a similar way. Right now, there's a lot of jurisdictional movement around private equity, in the space. California is one of those states, right? Illinois is taking a look at it. So it's just knowing those nuances. But Florida specifically you just kind of need to know that plaintiff attorneys in Florida, it's such competitive that your strategic, kind of merger buyers probably coming from out of the state of Florida.
Gotcha. So let's talk about your book, The Exit Blueprint. So what made now the right time to write that?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's the repeated, inquiries from the, 65-year-old attorney who, didn't plan, has started to already wind down their practice, wants succession, wants an exit, but really hasn't taken those steps. So the overall goal is to put something out there that really helps them, hopefully 5, 10, 15 years before. The other aspect, Benny, candidly, is because private equity is moving into this space fast and furious.
Right.
And so based on that, the market is changing quickly, and it's changing to the advantage of the sellers, to the law firm owners. And so really, as I saw it, no better time to revamp and put education out there about how to prep, but also how to transact, looking at structures, looking at different things, so that law firm owners knew they had the ability to do this, because we are going to see more and more retirement, and it's either going to be a wind down, like you're just going to wind down your practice and lose all that value, or you can take advantage of it and hopefully monetize and see that legacy continue on. And the goal of the book is to really take that second piece, right? Is to help you and hopefully carry that forward. So the exit blueprint is there to kind of say, do these things.
Yeah.
Then get ready to, go to market or look at your internal succession or whatever you need to do, and to really guide that. Attorneys, as you know, we like education. We like to know what the end is before we take that first step. And so the goal in the book is to really show them, yes, here's where things end, but you got to take that first step to get there.
Yeah, and I feel like in law school we learn about winding down, like it's all a part of like business and partnerships, but you don't learn about like the law practice exchange, like these other options, maybe because like you created them and you're the founder. So what is the transferable value really mean, like in the context of a law firm? Like what are you transferring?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done valuations, since 2013, right? I think we've probably got the largest proprietary database of market sales, comparables, valuations, anything else. But we've had a lot of time to go through and really figure out what it means, in the value of a law firm, right? Like transferable. And when we get to that, it's really in a simplistic, kind of structure. If you own a law firm, it is the benefit of ownership that you get from that. A lot of people would call that net income, right? Owner's cash flow, anything else, but it's really, what do you get as an owner, not as an employee. If you're doing legal work and you're practicing law within the practice, that salary and wages, it's really what is that owner benefit. And then can that be transferred to somebody else? And that's a real question with certain law firms, because a lot of it is, very personalized, right?
Right.
We had like, as an example, we had a firm years ago that it was, a trust and estates firm, but the owner had really reached, a sophisticated planning, did a lot of expert witness work, right? Hundreds of thousands a year in expert witness work. Well, at the end of the day, that made him a lot of money. It was high margin, anything else, but nobody else was going to be able to take that work over, because that was very personalized to him. So we had to adjust and say, well, the transferable value is not just taking, this revenue and this income adjusted, anything else. We have to really adjust and see that. And there's a lot of different instances, not just expert witness, of what really is transferable to that next owner, and then how to extract and monetize those terms. But it's really like, what benefit do I see as an owner? If I get true monetary benefit from ownership, we should be able to transition that to somebody else under the right structure and plan.
So I'm somebody who wants to sell a law firm, and like, what's your analysis like? Like, what do you ask me, like, before bringing me onto the exchange? Like, what do you do?
Yep. Everything starts with a valuation, right? Just like if you're going to go list your house, you're not going to list your house without, looking on Zillow or having a realtor run a market comparable analysis, right? You want to know what it's worth. And so that's what we do for, law firm owners. Some of them 10 years before they're ready to sell, just so they have that strategic knowledge. But if you're somebody that's like, I'm ready, I want to take that first step, we're going to go through valuation. And essentially, it is a financial deep dive. We're asking for profit and loss, income statements, tax returns, payroll, right? Everything on that side. We're also doing a SWOT analysis. I usually say, valuation comes down to 3 factors in a law firm. Your financials, it's also your brand, and it's your systems. And if you have a strong firm brand, right, that's kind of built, that's going to be a higher value typically. And if you have better systems that really make you as the owner a part of the puzzle, but not the key thing that everything runs through, right? It's less owner dependent based on those strong systems, higher value as well. So what I usually say is we do a SWOT analysis to really say, right, here's the financials, but where in market, because that's what we're doing market valuations, where in market is this going to really lie to potential buyers or anything else based on what you've built, how strong your firm is. And we've seen small firms have much better systems, much better sometimes brands than some of these larger firms that really have revenues and maybe have strong financials. So that's really where we try to focus in.
Okay. So what would you say the cost is to an attorney of waiting too long to do this? Like, what do you see that happen to a firm that keeps pushing it off?
Yeah, I think the first one is, as we mentioned, legacy is so important, and we get those calls that are unforeseen, health or otherwise. We get surviving spouses that call us and say, hey,
wow,
so-and-so just passed away, or we get peer attorneys that have stepped in to help a friend who's had a heart attack in the hospital, and they're trying to run their practice, and, they're trying to get value. So I think the biggest thing is if your professional legacy is important to you, then you want to see it, controlled the right way, right? Okay. And if you go along an exit plan, you have control, and you can, choose the successor. You can, decide on how things go. If you wait, you lose all that control. And as I mentioned, attorneys like control. So the goal is to really, take steps early to control the path. The other is, of course, the monetary benefit. I mean, it can fund your retirement early. It can be gravy on the top if you've already got all of your retirement funded. Some attorneys, most, have not looked at it as like, I'm building value in a business that I'm going to act out of. And so it's that huge benefit. And then the other is, I think, and this is where we get a lot of calls too, is, it's what does it do to your employees that have been with you for maybe 20 years, right? What does it do to the community or the industry or to the clients that you've served if you don't truly transfer, right, the practice and continue its service, beyond your ownership? And that's really, client loss, right? Those clients are going to have to scramble, or you just wind down and kind of let them go somewhere else. And those employees may have a different retirement timeline than you. And so the goal is you can keep them employed, right? If they're good employees, if, it's a good community that you want to see continue to serve, or good clients where you've really built a lot of knowledge about those clients, then find your right successor, your buyer, your otherwise, transfer that knowledge, handpick them and transfer that knowledge, and really see those different things like legacy, the financial, and the continuation of care continue.
So what are some of the biggest, when you start mapping this out in your book, you talk about different situations, like what have you seen that's like surprising? What's the most surprising stuff that you've seen as you've gone through?
Yeah, I think one is the counterintuitive that bigger is better, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is law firms. I have been behind the curtain in a lot of big law firms, right? Big revenue law firms. It does not mean they're stronger, right? They may have a lower valuation multiple than some smaller firms that are just built better. So from a standpoint, I would say bigger is not always better. It's really focused on, those brands, the systems otherwise. And then it's really looking at what really sells well. A lot of, lawyers come to us and say, look, I've got all these clients. I get all this revenue, right? Everything else. But then when we ask about, is there really a brand? Is there a system for marketing? Is there a system for how those clients come in and work with others within your firm? The usual answer is no. It just all comes to me. Right. Well, then it goes back to, well, then you've built it all around you. It's less about the business. It's more about you. You can still transfer that. It's just going to probably be at a lower value, longer timeline otherwise. And I think, from that standpoint, it's just, it's one of those things you need to be present of. The other is that internal succession myth. I will tell you, I was very high starting out 2013, 2014, that, everybody should just do deals with their internal successor. And that's how a profession, right, should be at least first choice. And over the years, I've just seen over and over again where it just doesn't work as often as you want.
Okay.
And that's the big part about having a marketplace is you have other options, right? And so the overall is they may be there. They may have been a great employee sometimes for 10, 15 years, anything else, but they may not be your next buyer.
Right.
And so just to sit around waiting and then one day come and say, hey, it's time for you to take over the firm. I'm going to retire at the end of the year. And they tell you and say, I'm not interested, right? I'm not interested in paying value. I don't want the ownership risk, whatever may be there is a real, blow to your timeline, to the total plan, to the legacy, everything else. And so it's, yes, if you have that candidate, work with them early, communicate early. But if not, hopefully you have a marketplace option.
Do some of these buyers buy a firm with the hinging on the fact that they're just going to get case after case after case because that's how the firm has been running? And so whether they keep the name or not, they're just expected to get all these cases. I mean, is that why a lot of these people are buying these firms?
Yeah. I mean, the expectation is revenues are going to continue.
Yeah.
Right? Is truly the revenues are going to continue. So you have to look at where those revenues come from, meaning where the clients or cases come from. As an example, if you're a well-branded personal injury firm and you use digital ads, billboards, TV, radio, otherwise, and all those leads are funded into an intake center and everything else, the owner has less impact on those leads, right? And so a buyer is a little bit more comfortable with that. If you're somebody that runs a trust and estates practice and you go to your Rotary Club, you're in the Chamber of Commerce, you've got a lot of personal referral sources, everything else, you still have a good practice potentially, but the buyer really sees that and says, ooh, I don't know that Rotary Club's going to like me as much as they like you, right? And I either have to go join Rotary to do that. So it's not to say, again, it's not done. We've transacted plenty of those Rotary-esque, practices. It's just a little slower and probably at a little less value. And the terms usually are different that the buyer's going to pay, right? They're going to be more excited and confident on that well-scaled branded firm.
Yep.
But overall, the personal referral firm, they're just going to have to take a little bit more participation in the risk.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So you recently posted about the UK being ahead of the US on non-lawyer ownership. So what should American law firms be paying attention to that right now?
Yeah, I think really, for those that don't know, the UK passed, alternative business structures or non-attorney ownerships for law firms, almost 2 decades ago, right? 15 years ago, I think. And really the map has kind of been, it was a slow start and it's picked up, and that's where private equity has moved into space. So you see private equity owned law firms. You see other, consolidation and movement. And I would tell you there's a lot I connect with advisors that do what we do over in the UK all the time because there's global movement as well. And I think it's really a roadmap for what's going to happen here in the US. And so it's easy right now as private equity and regulatory changes are being, changed like Arizona or Puerto Rico. They're also being challenged based on these MSOs in certain states. but it really is coming. And it's one of those things, if you're a founder in a law firm, it can be great if you build your firm the right way for the right exit, because there's new buyers to the game, right? There's probably plenty of buyers for any good firm, but now we've got this new breed of buyers with private capital and otherwise. And I think if you're a founder that, you're running a law firm and you have no immediate vision of exit or anything else, you're trying to grow, it's just to know that your competition's changing. Really, we see, well-funded, well-run, well-managed firms now coming in and consolidating and getting bigger. And so the competition landscape in certain practice areas is going to look a lot different in the next 5 to 10.
So what types of law firms, like what practice areas tend to be like the best to be in the, or be more successful in the marketplace?
Yeah, right now, the most buyer interest we're seeing, of course, is in personal injury, right?
Okay.
Part of the reason is that is brand, systems, and financial, right? Like most personal injury firms, if they've done the right things, they've got a good brand, they've built systems, and they've got good financials, to kind of cater that.
Yep.
But next tier that we're really seeing in consumer services, immigration, family law, trust and estates, corporate, right? If you're in a business corporate practice, otherwise, we're seeing, ancillary plaintiff, SSDI, workers' comp, right? Being a key part, employment law. Anything I would tell you that really can be a system and you can look and say, I built it into this system and it can be scaled going forward with maybe investment in technology, better management, better marketing, other aspects. The practices that don't do as well are multi-practice firms. So say a firm does a little bit of real estate, a little bit of trust and estates, some litigation, because then what you're asking is a buyer to come in and do all of those, right? Versus one. And law firms overall, as you know, are becoming, most of them are more focused on 1, 2 practice areas and much larger multi-discipline firms. And so it just becomes a little bit more of a challenge. But I would say any of those things on consumer, private equity is very interested in some of our AmLaw, large firms. So it'll be interesting to see which kind of do deals with private equity in the next year or so. It's coming.
That's
but also, any of the consumer scalable firms are good opportunities. There's buyers in the market for it.
Yeah, I remember when we were on the verge of the PE thing. Now it's kind of here, That's crazy. So you've said firms need a bulletproof AI answer. What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, I think it's really, why are you not going to be replaced by AI?
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Like, where are you building a moat to do that?
Right.
I'll give an example. If you're an attorney that's just cranked out wills, and that's what you've done, right?
Right.
Wills, you do a lot of numbers of wills, right? Everything else. Well, AI or the new alternative legal providers that are using AI and drafting everything, they're coming for you, right? In full speed. And so the goal is to say, well, are you positioning then to migrate over to be more advisory, right? To become more on the estate planning, move up, move to a higher, move to other practice areas that maybe has a little bit more of a moat, and, kind of carry that forward. Because there's definitely things that AI is already having a significant impact on. But I think that really goes for a lot of areas, right? I mean, we see immigration and a lot of transactional aspects to that being kind of replaced by AI, software-driven tech companies.
Tons.
And so that's really it. Like, what's your answer to that? If you were to say, well, look, if AI can do this and it can draft wills pretty well, what are you going to do? And if you don't have an answer to that, that's going to be pretty tough for AI.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. This might lead to my next question. What separates a highly desirable acquisition target from a firm that struggles to attract buyers?
Yeah. Going back, I know it's kind of that broken record, but it's that, strong financials, systems that don't rely on the owner, and a good, strong brand. The other aspect is you're ready and you're reasonable, meaning that you're ready to transact as a seller, and you're reasonable and you know what your numbers are and what to expect. It's not an emotional decision is how you set your asking price.
Yep.
It's been built on that. So much feedback we got from early in the market was we had, good buyers, but they would go and, they'd go to a seller and they'd say, well, what's your price? And the price would be set on emotional, not really financial. It's there's no way that's going to transact, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you want to sell that house you've had forever, and you you need to sell it. And somebody comes in and it's worth, $500,000 and they ask and you said $3 million. Nobody's going to buy it.
Right.
Emotionally, you're not ready to let go. And that's a big challenge. So reasonable, right? And, kind of ready to go from that side.
And you've worked with firms representing more than 300 million in revenue. So what patterns do you see among firms that build long-term enterprise value?
Yeah, I think it's that scalability from those factors we talked about, right? The systems, the brand, the otherwise. The larger firms, as I mentioned, we've seen some pretty large firms based on revenue that have very low, what I'll call owner's value, because, Benny, the larger partnerships, sometimes they're just taking it all out as compensation, right? So everybody's working hard, everything else, but there's not really a lot of true business value. The best businesses we see are owners who can say, we're making good money, but I'm going to invest back in the business. And as I invest back in the business, I'm going to invest in technology. I'm going to invest in people, like the next tier of people, to me, to really build out so that it's not an owner dependent practice.
So like delegation is like a big thing, sort of. Like,
it's traction, right? The book Traction, like delegate to elevate is a huge success factor. Is the more you can put yourself in that owner's box, the better off your practice will, usually be, if you can find the right people for getting on the bus and everything else. But the overall goal is you really start to see scale. And, that's a challenge with a lot of law firms. And I know there's, if there's small law firms listening right now, they're like, it's me and a paralegal. How do I do that?
Right.
But overall, you just start by taking your yellow legal pad out and starting to create a checklist, right? And as you grow, your systems grow, and then you can kind of add the right people to that and really get yourself into what is the best value, right, for you as a lawyer or as that owner to do. And that's usually where we see, right, that scale. And I mean, honestly, Benny, you've seen the firms too. The overall is when we see firms that are run, by a non-attorney COO, right? And the attorney, of course, owns the firm, but that COO has come in and really implemented a lot of, good improvements to provide scale and kind of management and everything else.
Yeah. Wow. And how important would you say culture is to team continuity in these transactions?
Yeah, extremely important. Law firms are still a human capital driven business.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
From that and everything else. The biggest thing that we talk to buyers or, investors, if they're going into law firms, is, your goal is not to come in and demand change and scare everybody off, because they can leave. And if they leave, value is going to be lost. And so it's really to focus on that integration to make sure the cultural fits there. And to that point, I mean, we talk to our sellers all the time is, when you go and meet with the buyer, they're interviewing you, right? They want to know, is this something that I want to buy and everything else? But as the process continues and as due diligence goes through and you're trying to get to a closing, it becomes more of a mutual, because you really want to focus on that culture, right? You want to focus on letting them know and getting how they're going to present and integrate. And if we've had deals that it just doesn't work, right?
Right.
There's one more of that true awareness. And if it doesn't, then don't do the deal, because truly that will be a deal killer afterwards. It'll just not make it a success. And so, human capital is what law firms are made of right now.
Yeah.
And so, from that aspect, it's very important to see if you can, the culture may change and you may have to transition it, but a buyer should understand the seller's culture, handle it carefully, really kind of transition it. And the seller should understand why the buyer's maybe going to make some of those changes. So a big part of it is communication, before the closing, to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Totally. So for lawyers who are growth-minded but not ready to sell, what are some practical things they should start doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. One of it is get a valuation, right? Know what you've built, and then know what your growth plans are going to increase that exit value. We tell everybody, I mean, if you're building a better practice that's making you more money, you are going to increase your valuation. But also, if you really want to know what the market appreciates and your plan is, I'm going to grow and then I'm going to exit either to my internal buyers, to a marketplace buyer, to private equity, whatever your case is, then know those, factors that you can really throttle down to help increase that value. And I think the other aspect is, if you're doing this, do it with purposeful exit in mind, not just the valuation and getting that knowledge, but building a firm that is ready for exit. And that's part of the exit blueprint, right? The book is meant to give you, if you're 20 years away and I'm going to build a great law firm. Great. You're going to build, you're going to read books, you're going to listen to good podcasts that are going to help you do that. But you also want to build with an exit in mind, because we've seen it. I've seen it over the years. Those that build, continuously with exit in mind, truthfully, they're going to get the highest and best terms. They're going to get the easiest sales versus those that all of a sudden just say, you know what, I should sell or I should exit. How do I do this? And they built a firm in a certain way. And just as a quick example of that, one of my favorite, deals that we had was a 32-year-old female attorney owner who, had second kid, decided, I built a good firm. I like being a business owner, but I also want to be more dedicated to be a mom. She's not 65.
Right.
She's 32.
Sure.
And the overall goal was to do that. But she had built her firm firmly with good coaching, like good coaching programs, everything else, but built her firm as a business that could be exited. And it exited at a top value with a great strategic buyer, everything else, and really funded her to allow her to exit, retire, and go do what she wants to do. Plus, she was going to do consulting and everything else as part of it.
32, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So if a lawyer is out there listening and they're 5 to 10 years from out from wanting to exit, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away from the exit blueprint and act on this week?
Yeah. Well, first, just start somewhere, right? I tell everybody, take a first step and start communicating, whether that's with like a spouse, a significant other, an attorney, a good friend. Like, I have started this planning aspect because it becomes green when you communicate. But, as we talked about, Benny, it's get a valuation. I would tell you, we have a law firm estimator on our website at the Law Practice Exchange.
That's awesome.
You can go there. It's napkin math, but to give you a guide of essentially what that would be, and also hopefully put you into perspective like, oh, I built something that has value and I want to continue to do that or anything else. And then really it's, start separating yourself from that revenue, right? That delegate to elevate concept. If you are, years or you got time, what can you do to attach the revenue to the business? And that may be in your brand, it may be in how you market, it may be other things, but the more you can shift things over to the business is what drives this revenue versus it's me as the attorney. It's just going to be more ready for exit, higher dollar value, more buyers, better terms.
Yep. So Tom, looking back at what you've built with the Law Practice Exchange, what are you most proud of?
I would tell you, I think these days I'm most proud of the marketplace, right? It's it's truly, it's the ability to have 2,000 and some buyers and sellers and 100 and some transactions running that gives a lot of attorneys that wouldn't have the option before, right? Like they would not have had the option to seek a buyer or a seller to have that option. So, we started building the marketplace, 3+ years ago. Yeah. It's taken a while to continue. We're still working on it, getting ready to roll out a bunch of new features and everything else.
Yeah.
But, we've completed $50 million deals for law firms. I'm very proud of those. But overall, I'm very proud of having a place that any size law firm, right, with the right guidance and everything else, can hopefully find their right, buyer, their right seller, and anything else from that. Because in my belief, when we were talking about, back in 2013, this is what starts to get us to a comparable to those dentists, CPAs, elements.
Wow, it's amazing. It'll be interesting to see what you come out with next for the Law Practice Exchange. And did we leave anything out that you wanted to touch on today?
I don't think so. I think we've covered, pretty much anything. Again, the overall goal for us, Benny, is to be a resource. And so we always encourage everybody to visit the Law Practice Exchange. We've got great things in our learning center there. There's other podcasts, anything else. But, from the biggest thing, I will tell you, the one thing that we see over and over again is they hear this podcast and they say, man, this is for me, right? Like I didn't know this thing existed.
No, it's cool. I like it.
And then the problem is they don't take that next step, right? And it's really like you can say, I've got 5 to 10 years, but the problem is when you start your real planning in 8 years, right? Like you're in the same position for that, and repeatedly. And that's the goal is if you really want to exit, start now, just today. It doesn't matter if you're 20 years out. That would be my parting words to anybody that's got a good practice looking to make sure they can preserve the legacy.
I love it. Well, let us know how we can help. We're happy to do so. And Tom Lenfestey, everybody, the Law Practice Exchange. Stay right there. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourself. Cheers.